Hello lads and welcome to yet another video. Now as we watch this, it is official that Steven Moffat is no longer showrunner for Doctor Who. Long live Chibbers, a new reign starts, a new era is just around the corner. Albeit the corner's like a fair bit away, like at least half a mile, but we're walking towards it at a steady pace and we'll be there soon enough. But with this dawn of a new era, I thought it would be interesting to see what the new showrunners contributed to Doctor Who, because it's not as if he's contributed iconic stories like Steven Moffat had to the Russell T Davies era. I think it's well known that he's produced sort of middle of the road stories, but I thought it'd be interesting to look back on these, watch them properly and see what Chris Chibnall has put in those, which could be transferred into his new era as showrunner, if you understand what I'm saying, in this little 3-part series, if you like, where I do a Chibberthon. So, without further ado, let's begin with his first contribution to Doctor Who in Series 3's 42. Now 42, we see the Doctor and Martha answer a distress call on board a cargo ship, the SS Pentalion. Pentalion, I think that's how it's pronounced, in which the ship is at 42 minutes away from crashing into a sun. Very exciting. Now, unusually, and I don't think this has been done with any Doctor Who episode before, or I don't think since, but this episode was in fact followed up by an online prose piece, a story, which wasn't written by Chris Chibnall, but it was written by Joseph Lister, I think his name was, and basically it gave the background of one of the crew. And before I go on to this, I know it's not written by Chibnall, but I think more episodes should do this, because if you've got a sort of a base Under Siege episode, you won't have time to fully explore all the characters and their backgrounds. You won't have time to explore their motivations. By having perhaps just like a little story concentrating on one of them and their history and their motivations and their story, that could be an opportunity to care about them and give us some information that wouldn't have been able to put across on TV, since there's not enough time to explore that. So having that online as a prose piece, I think would be a good idea for these little crew members that just get killed off and you don't really care about them if you're just watching TV. I know it shouldn't be something that should be done, and if like anything you can portray across on TV is, you know, great, and you shouldn't have to rely on prose to do that. But I think it'd just be a nice idea to add a little something to it, so that's all good. Anyway, Chibnall. 42 was the first story since the revival to try something experimental with its use of real time. The countdown emphasised this, 42 minutes to save the ship, and it was actually 42 minutes as we were watching the episode. It's straightforward enough. And out of all the sort of experiments that Doctor Who's done since, I think this has stood to be the most successful, because you feel that excitement, you feel the pressure and the tension as the time's ticking away. You get the constant reminder of the countdown saying 42 minutes or whatever it is until we crash into the sun. And as the action progresses and the stakes get higher, and as like the temperature gets hotter and the time continues to tick down, we are desperate to have them solve the situation, because it's not like you can just cut an hour later and everything's sorted. We need to see how it's done, and it needs to be within this amount of time, which is good. I think if Chris Chibnall can perform more of these experiments with stories and have them successful in his new era, that'd be great, because we've had some experimental stuff. We've had Point of View in Sleep No More, we've had character stories with Twice Upon a Time, and they haven't really worked because they haven't been executed to their full potential. But if Chris Chibnall can do this with an experimental piece, then hopefully he can do more successful experiments of storylines and storytelling in the future, and that's something I'm incredibly excited for if he decides to do that. The main concept of the episode is that the main enemy is a sentient sun, and while this is ridiculous, it's not the most ridiculous thing Doctor Who's seen. You have to have some suspension of disbelief. It's a large universe. We've had a cold sun in Doctor Who now. A sentient sun is a grand idea, and it's a grand idea for something that possesses people, and that was done brilliantly. Hopefully Chris Chibnall can introduce more of these inventive monsters and aliens and sort of these wacky ideas, but still have them threatening and not just a ridiculous gimmicky thing, but actually have them as a threat and an actual villain. That would be great, because, I mean, I don't know if it's just me, but a lot of villains for the past couple of series have been forgettable. I mean, yes, there have been some good ones, but there's been nothing really iconic, and I'm not saying the sentient sun in 42 is iconic, because it's not one of the villains that stands out as a grand one in Tennant's era, but I think if he can be more creative with these villains, then perhaps we will get a more iconic villain in Chibnall's run, and that'll be a very good thing. The combination with the sci-fi fantasy action element and the human emotional drama has been combined perfectly in this story, because it's a well-known thing that Russell T Davies' era of Doctor Who has been known for having that human drama element in it, and it was done to perfection here. I don't know if it was Russell T Davies' his contribution to the script and his editing, or to Chris Chibnall's story, but it definitely worked. As the action went on, you found out more about the characters and their relationships, especially the central ones like Captain MacDonald and her husband, and you saw that element of love and trust, and you had the sort of blame and the flaws of the characters, and spoiler alert, with Captain MacDonald's sacrifice at the end with Corwin, as they jettisoned into the sun as an act of sort of love and a sort of redemption for MacDonald after all her flaws. And it was all paced very well, all this. You learned more about them as it went on, and you learned it at the right times. So I hope Chris Chibnall can introduce a more human, emotional element, and like really use the drama to its full potential. That'll be fantastic if he done that. 42 was also the first time in the revival that a story arc has really impacted an individual story like it had done, because we had a sort of subplot of Francine calling Martha, and she was being listened to by an unknown figure. It would have been later discovered that this was working for Harold Saxon, aka the Master, but this was the first time that this was really brought to our attention. We've had brief mentions of Bad Wolf and Torchwood in the past, but now we've really got this story arc interfering with the story. It creates intrigue, but it's not too poignant. You're just left thinking, I wonder what that was about, instead of thinking, oh, this is fundamental to the story. It was just a nice little side thing, and it wasn't a grand, sort of build-up like it has been in Series 6. It wasn't the sole focus of it, and it didn't take anything away or distract from the individual story as it is. But yeah, that is more or less 42 in a nutshell. Very good episode, I would say. A good 7-8 out of 10. Very nice. And if that's Chris Chibnall's first contribution, then what else could he have up his sleeve next? Well, let's have a look, as his next story, 2 series on, is at Matt Smith, Series 5, The Hungry Earth and Cold Blood. In Series 5's Cold Blood, we travel 10 years into the future to a small Welsh village where a tribe of Silurians are coming to the surface in preparation to take back the Earth, what was rightfully theirs. Lovely stuff. Now this episode, this story, it's got a lot of slack from fans, and I don't think it's one of their favourites, but to be honest, it's one of my guilty pleasures. I think a lot of the hate comes from the redesign of the Silurians and how they completely differentiated from the classic series design, but I think it's actually really nice. It shows the more human element, it shows that we and them aren't so different, and it has been clearly explained in the script that they're a different branch of the species, they're a different tribe to the one seen in the classics, so technically it's a whole different race of people, and not really that connected to the ones we've seen in the classic series anyway. I think I've mentioned in a video before that I'd like to see this sort of design of Silurian and the more classic tribe sort of coexist in an episode set in prehistory. I think that sort of dynamic would work really well, and since Chibnall brought back these sort of new designs of Silurians, I think he'd tackle that brilliantly, but that's up to him if he wants to do that. I'd personally love it. Now, something that sets these stories out from the rest in Series 5, for better or worse, is the pacing of the episode. It's a lot slower, and we don't get into the action as soon as we would if it was just a single 45-minute episode, and I personally think that's really good. Because it feels much more like the classic series. It feels that we have more time to build up on character relations and relationships and get to know the characters, to care about them before they die. It gives us more time to build mystery and tension, to get us more engaged and immersed within the storyline, and it also fits in with the episode's themes, which isn't as much heavy on the action, adventure and guns firing side. It more focuses on the peace negotiations and the peace talks, and I think that is something, even if it is just for one story like it was in this series, it's something like important to concentrate on that, because after all, that is the Doctor's goal. That is what primarily he should always aim for. He doesn't want to spend time fighting and running away from explosions all the time. He just wants to sit down and talk that is his main goal. And to have an episode where that actually succeeds in a sense, along with the sort of more rebellious military side, that subplot going on, but to have that as the primary focus of an episode really sort of sets forth the Doctor's goal, and it actually shows that he is true to his word and he does want peace in events, and he's not just relying on explosions and everything like that. So having concentration on that is really good. I seriously hope that's something that Chibnall does bring back in a sort of minority as his time as showrunner. The only real complaint I have for these stories is towards the end of Cold Blood, and it's the bit where just as they're about to escape, Rory gets shot and there's that whole business with the crack in time, and that gets explored some more. I feel that this sort of differentiates from the pace, and it sort of feels like a completely different segment to what we've been seeing for the past 2 episodes. But I feel it screams that this had Moffat's intervention in it to try and squeeze a bit of the story arc in there, especially since now we're ending the series and we're approaching the finale ever so slightly now. We've passed the halfway mark for the story, and this is building the mystery of what the crack in time is. But it feels like it differentiates from what the rest of the story has been it's building towards. It doesn't really feel like Chibnall's writing. It feels like either Moffat has rewritten the ending of the script to sort of convolutedly shove this in, or he's told Chibnall last minute to try and include it somewhere. I don't know what the ending would have been, but I know it wouldn't have been this, because it just feels like a different writing style altogether for what it covers. Of course, it's important to sort of progress the character arcs and have Amy forget Rory and have him erased from time so he can come back in the finale and the Pandorica opens, but I feel like if Chibnall didn't like it, or if it was felt rushed, or I don't know his personal thoughts on it, but I don't think it translated well onto screen that good. But hopefully this will give him a lesson on how to deal with other writers' scripts, to including their story arc in it. I think it's been confirmed that there's a writer's room for Series 11 now, which will benefit this incredibly, so you won't have to shove something in last minute and change the script entirely. But I think it will be a good thing to sort of incorporate story arcs as a more fluid sense as it was in 42. But all in all, I think The Hungry Earth and Cold Blood is a really strong story. It has its own merits, and it doesn't shy away from trying something new, but also settling back on the old stuff and having a strong foundation to build another story on top of that. But I feel it's good. I feel it's very underrated. I feel like it gets a lot of slack from what it deserves it. So all in all, I like it a good 6-7 out of 10 for me. And I feel like that so far the stories that Chibnall's have been writing has been really good. What could possibly go wrong?
Dinosaurs on a spaceship.
Series 7's second episode, Dinosaurs on a Spaceship, sees the Doctor find out about a impending spacecraft on a crash course to Earth, and gathers Egyptian Queen Nefertiti and fictional African plane hunter Amy, Rory's dad, to go and sort of stop it before the Indian Space Army in the future launches missiles at it. Now, probably from that premise alone, you could tell that this episode is a bit of a clusterfuck, and that's within the first 2 minutes. You're immediately plunged into this episode with the Doctor and Queen Nefertiti after just having an adventure with giant space roaches in ancient Egypt with Queen Nefertiti. I don't know about you, but that sounds like an incredibly more interesting premise for an episode than whatever the hell this was, and I seriously hope this stops in the future. Stop giving anecdotes of far more interesting adventures than what we're seeing, because I'm going to think, hang on, what the hell was this episode? I want to see that. Why aren't we seeing that? Queen Nefertiti and John Riddell are there for no reason, really. Their characters are sort of one-dimensional. You've got the masculine sexist and the empowered female, and those two sort of butt heads at each other with a social agenda. It's clear this episode has a social agenda of gender politics, which is fine. I think if you've watched me for long enough, you know I'm fine with all that, and you can probably tell that there's definitely going to be that in Series 11 if he's going to carry on writing the conflicts with characters and gender like he has in here, Chris Chibnall, I mean, obviously. But apart from that, there was no reason for it. It didn't really contribute anything to the story. They were just there because, hey, why not? It felt like fan fiction. It felt like someone just went, oh, okay, what if an Egyptian pharaoh went to space and a hunter was also there, and there were also dinosaurs on a spaceship. It turns out that the spaceship on which the dinosaurs are on, as the title suggests, is owned by the Silurians, and this would make it the second time in a row that Chris Chibnall has written for the Silurians, and I much preferred how he handled them in The Hungry Earth and Cold Blood, even though you don't see them really in this episode, only as a video footage. I mean, the ideas of the Silurians having space travel and putting dinosaurs on a space ark and having them survive for that long, it's sort of implausible for me, because I know the Silurians are, like, technologically more advanced than we are now, and that's sort of what makes them so sort of great in a sense. But there's only a certain amount you can go without having to think, hang on, if they can make well-built spaceships and send them out to space, then why didn't they figure out that the object hurtling towards the planet is going to catch up in its orbit? Because they could have measured it with velocity or mass or, I don't know, something which would have told them that it's not going to crash into Earth. And they've got to think, how did they not know that, but they can build a spaceship? And that's just one of the biggest things that irritates me about this episode. It might only be a small thing, but it just annoys me so much how the Silurians are this advanced now. I know they should be advanced, but not this advanced. It should be remembered that Doctor Who is a family show, which means it is for everyone. It's for adults, people my age, teenagers, kids. And this felt like it was primarily a kids' episode, and that's fine. It is sort of, in a sense, it was created to be a kids show, but when it's now a family show and it's got to appeal for everyone, this doesn't really do it, because it is sort of a wacky sort of, it feels like a Sarah Jane Adventures episode more than a Doctor Who episode, because it just sort of leaves the older audience out, I think, because the tone is just too silly. The tone is all over the place. The majority of it, a strong 90% of it, is wacky, childish, silly humour. You've got dinosaurs on a spaceship. Ooh, how silly. But then you've got talk of genocide and the Doctor actually vengefully killing someone in cold blood. Literally just sends him off with no remorse to get blown up by missiles, doesn't even attempt to give him a second chance or save him. So that's a bit dark, but also mixed in with that, you've got cock and ball jokes. You've got the game hunter Riddell, I think his name is, make a very big weapon joke, and you've got Brian Williams talking about his balls, his golf balls, and you just got to think, hang on, what's going on? Who's this aimed at again? And also, one of the biggest irritating things I have about this episode is that it is such a waste of Mitchell and Webb, who voiced the robots, and their performance is just, I don't know if it's because they're supposed to be robots and robotic, but it just sounds like they didn't want to be here. It sounds like we've been invited onto one of the most prestigious science fiction shows, probably television shows on British television, and we've got stuck with this part. Needless to say, this was probably Chris Chibnall's weakest that he's written for Doctor Who, and I hope he has learned from the mistakes that he has done in this to write better things. But it's alright, he has a chance to redeem himself, because his next episode was written literally 2 episodes after this, in The Power of Three. Now, in The Power of Three, we see Amy and Rory living life on Earth, debating whether they should carry on travelling with the Doctor or just sit at home and live normal human lives. Meanwhile, there's an invasion of tiny cubes which are just sitting there and nobody really knows what to do with them, but that's fine. Now, personally, I think The Power of Three is a really underrated episode. It's one of my favourites from Series 7, one of them, not the one, and I think mixed in amongst all the grander adventures in the series, it is sort of lost in there, but it's such a great episode. It tackles with the human emotions and the relationships and the sort of what actually goes on in the characters' heads, and it studies that brilliantly. And it's definitely character exploration like this which I'd love to see in Series 11. I'd love to see Chibnall tackle some more, especially with the Doctor, because it explores his motivations and his actions without making him seem too godlike or mythical like Steven Moffat has been known to do, but it's saying that he is running towards Amy and Rory before they flare and fade from him forever. And even though that does sound a bit melodramatic, it's very human and it's very sort of emotional, and it's not this giant space-time science fiction reason. It's just nice and believable, and it's relatable, and I really love that scene when him and Amy are sitting on the Thames and just talking about how big the universe is and how much of it there is to see. It is one of my favourite scenes of that series, and I absolutely adore it, and I wish there was more scenes like that, and I hope there's more to come in the future. And this episode is also famous for introducing Kate Stewart, who is a very good character, and her motivation is basically to lead UNIT, to be more science motivated, and I absolutely adore that about her character, and I do love Kate Stewart's character in this, and I seriously hope Chris Chibnall wants to introduce more original returning characters in his new series, and hopefully that aren't too classic motivated, because even though I love Kate and as a character, she's not totally original because she is a Lethbridge Stewart. Cue the meme. Everybody smiles, the Doctor salutes, the Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart theme plays. But hopefully he can introduce more sort of returning characters who aren't Lethbridge Stewarts or tied to classic series, and aren't companions either, because I really do like Kate, and I hope we see more characters like her. Not her, well, hopefully her, maybe her, because Chris is taking the reins, and technically Kate Stewart is an original character of Chris Chibnall, so maybe we'll see more of her, who knows, and maybe some characters from the Big Finish UNIT box set. I'd love that. The premise of the story itself is very good for exploring both the action science fiction element and also the character-based motivate, like sort of a human element of it, because you've got this invasion but nothing's happening, so while nothing's happening, let's go and explore the characters' relationships and their problems, especially with the Doctor life versus real life dilemma. That's explored brilliantly in this, and I think it could be shown that you can't have both in a sort of sense, and the way it shows that is brilliant. Of course, this is the second appearance of Brian Williams, and his character is put to much better use in this episode. You can see the his relationship with Rory more. You can explore more about his character, and you're not put in this wacky sort of outlandish adventure where they're on a spaceship or something. It's very human, and you get to relate to them more, especially the last scene where he tells Amy and Rory to go off with the Doctor and save as many worlds as they can, because who else has that chance? And I love that. And even though I'm not going to be looking at it, Chris Chibnall also wrote P.S., which was a little short explaining how the Doctor went back to Brian to explain that Amy and Rory aren't coming home. And having those explorations, having the relationships between the companions' families, I know I'm going on about it a lot, I'm saying relationships and motivations and characters are fucking awful lot in this video, but sorry, I got a phone call about having a social life, because apparently I have one of those, and because I don't script these things, I forgot what I was saying. So hopefully you can draw a conclusion to what I think yourself then. I'm hoping you can. Do I have any more points? Oh god, yes, the villain, the Shakri. Now I know a lot of people don't like the Shakri because they're brought in last minute, and the way that they were defeated was very rushed, but I think the motivation and the potential is streaming there. This is main series arc villain quality here. Their motivation to wipe out the plague of humanity before they infest the galaxies with colonisation, that's brilliant. Let's have that. Let's have some of that original characters, original series arc villain characters in there, which don't have to be built up by 3 series worth of story arcs. I love the Shakri. I really want them to return as a main series villain. Please, Chibbers, do this for me. And I'm going to run because my battery's running low and I've got a social life to go to. God, it's about time. So yeah, that's all the episodes that Chris Chibnall has worked on for Doctor Who, and that's what I want for those episodes to bring into Series 11. I'm going to be doing another video where I'm going to be looking at all his episodes that he's wrote on Torchwood, so I look forward to that. Hope you've enjoyed this Chibberthon. Stay safe, drink water, stay in school, don't do drugs. Cool.